Starting live video. Just leave it. Have a seat, everybody. Hi, I'm Felice, and I'm blessed and grateful to be in recovery. And this is our Wacky Wednesday Why Wait for Recovery community meeting.
Hi, my name's Haiti, and I'm blessed and grateful to be in recovery, and welcome.
Welcome. So, tonight we're going to talk about recovery. What is it, and where can we get some?
And can we buy it?
Or do whatever to get it, or get it quickly, right, since we're addicts. And so somebody was asking us, somebody in the community, hi girls, was asking us what recovery was. And so we know that there is a difference between abstinence and recovery. We know that when we're not using, right? We know especially if we're post-surgery, we can't use for a while, right? And so we're not eating the stuff that we're used to eating, and we can go a month or 2 months or 6 months or whatever and not use. But it doesn't mean that that in fact that we're in recovery. And so recovery has to do with our thinking, because our addiction had to do with our thinking. And abstinence just means that we're not picking up our drug of choice, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the thing with abstinence, though, is that when we're using, we're not thinking clearly. So for us that are addicts, we have this obsession of the mind. We have these physical things that happen inside our body, and we don't think clearly. So we have to abstain to be able to start working on our recovery. I mean, essentially, that's what I understand.
Right, and that's correct. And so we find that once we abstain, that gives the neurotransmitters in our brain time to get cleaned out, right? But just because we've abstained and we've cleaned out those neurotransmitters, again, doesn't mean that we're in recovery. And so recovery is going to have more to do with, when you talk about our thinking, that's exactly right. It's going to be, we're in recovery, we're learning how to change our perspective, change our feelings, so that we can change our actions and our behavior. Because if we don't change what's eating us first, if we don't learn to understand what it is we're feeling, why it is that we're feeling it, and how it is that we deal with those things, whether we're using it or not, we're still not in recovery.
So the beginning part of abstinence I call the why and what if phase.
Okay.
Because that's when I go, what if I never have to touch this again? Or why can't I eat this? Or why can't I just swap this for this? And it's a whole conversation phase that I get into in my head when I first abstaining from foods. Well, certain foods, my trigger foods as I call them, because they trigger madness and crazy behavior. So in the beginning, when I first started, it's almost like the beginning phase of a diet, that 4-lettered word, where all of a sudden that whole side of my brain starts kicking in, and I start arguing with myself. What if I did this? How does this look? And that becomes my argument phase.
Yeah, and so that's really good that you said that, because we just talked about how abstaining doesn't have anything to do with recovery. And when you're in your argument phase, it's because you're crazy. So we know that if we weren't nuts to begin with, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't have to be worried about what recovery looks like, because we wouldn't be addicts. Right? So people who can think clearly, can feel, can have kind of an understanding about how they're feeling, or at least know that feelings aren't facts, and that it's okay to have feelings without stuffing them, right? Or without dulling them. Those people don't need to have this conversation, and those people won't become addicts.
So the part that actually brought me into the rooms was when I started realizing that I was doing the same thing over and over again, getting the same results, but expecting different effects. So they reached a stage where I had to try and do something different, because what I was doing is I was picking up those trigger foods, I was having those same reactions, I was abstaining for a couple of days, and then I'd be clean for 2-3 days or a week, and then I'd pick up one and it would trigger a whole behavior that I couldn't stop picking up, and I couldn't stop eating. And I'd be having those crazy dreams, or start looking at the refrigerator at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, or whatever that looked like. So when do things start looking different? I mean, when is it abstinence and when is it recovery? How do they look different?
So you talked about what brought you into the rooms, right, or brought you into recovery. And I'm going to tell you that what brought me into the rooms with that was that I was very sick. I was very emotionally sick, and I was stuck and scared all of the time. And because I was stuck and scared all of the time and didn't know how to deal with, as I say, life on life's terms, because I didn't know how to deal with life. I did whatever I could that I could do to not be sick and not be fearful and not be scared all of the time. And I picked up whatever it is that I could find to pick up. My thing was drugs, alcohol, or starvation, any of those things, so that I could pay attention to something else beside what I was feeling.
Right. So I know there's been a bit of movement and a couple of things shuffling and a couple of distractions. So I just want to quickly check in and tell everyone what this looks like. So Felice and I live stream on Facebook. The only people that are seen on Facebook is the two of us on the sofa. There are other people in the room via Zoom through a virtual platform, and some people are actually sitting in the room. That is private. Only people on that format can see each other. No one else can see you, because I do know privacy and privacy has been a huge question today. If you comment on our Why Wait for Recovery page on Facebook, where we do live stream, your friends will see those comments. If you're commenting in our group, our private group, which is called Downsizing Weight Loss, only members of that group can see what you're writing. So that is a private group. So just remember, Why Wait for Recovery is a public format in terms of our page on Facebook. Everything else is private. So whatever is discussed here stays amongst us when we're on Zoom and when we are in Downsizing Weight Loss. So we talk to thousands and thousands of people every single meeting, because overeating, emotional eating, compulsive overeating, food addiction isn't something that is just contained to the people participating here. It is pervasive. There are millions and millions of people who live with shame and guilt because they've tried serial dieting and it hasn't worked. It is not a behavior modification process, because if it worked, our first diet would have worked and we wouldn't have ever had to diet again if it was a behavior issue. For us, it's more, we have an obsession of the mind. We have certain physical things that happen, and we have to take certain actions to be able to go into recovery. We connect on a heart-to-heart level and a heart-to-heart basis as addicts, because that's how we find recovery, as well as taking certain steps that enable us to get recovery, which is working a program, having sponsors, doing certain things that help us get recovery, be in recovery, and stay in recovery.
Yeah, and what we're always going to remember, you guys, is that it's never about the substance. So it's never about the food, and it's never about the alcohol, and it's never about the starvation or the drugs or the gambling or the sex. It's never about that. It's about what's eating us. And so we always have to go back to that it's about what's eating us, what's making us the way that we are, or having us feel the way that we feel, or what's making us so scared and so sick, that first of all, we even thought that we needed to use, right, to change the way that we're feeling. And then once we do use, in the addict's brain, something different happens, right? Because we could have people that say, oh, I've had such a bad day at work and I think I'll have a piece of cake, and they do. And then 3 months later, maybe they do it again. It's not that they wake up at night and they can't wait to have another piece of cake, or that one cake looks like, 50,000 cookies, or their brains have an idea of what's okay and what's enough. And for us, it's never enough. And so chemically something happens that's different in the addict's brain. And that's where the addiction leads us to. But the addiction has to do with feelings. The behavior is the end result of us not being able to deal with the way that we feel, for picking something up that our brain actually says, wow, this is great. Maybe if I do more, it'll be better. So I'll do more and it'll be better, and I'll do more until I can't stop doing more. And then instead of better, it's horrifying. And we're sicker and scarier than we were to begin with.
And in terms of my addiction and my process and how I was feeling, is I spent so many years numbing how I was feeling, so I didn't feel that I was worthy of either discussing my feelings, having friends, being seen, being out. I always felt I needed to present myself in a different way. And as I got more and more into my addiction, I started isolating more, and I became more and more depressed, and my world became darker and smaller, and I felt more alone and more lonely. And all of a sudden, starting to be able to name that process and name what was really where it came from, and realizing that it's a disease and not a choice. I'm an addict, and by me being able to say I'm an addict, it really changes the dynamic within my own brain to start working towards a solution.
Right, because until we say that we're addicts, we don't need to look for a solution.
So